When you done that?
4.5 or 5.
Yeah. And you drove from where?
Long Beach to Partridge.
In what type of vehicle?
Ford pickup truck. I don't know why Dad had the Ford pickup truck. I don't know where he got it. All I know is he had that red Ford pickup truck.
What year was this?
40, 41. During the war. Dad went down there to work in the shipyards. Mom got a job also working in the shipyards for a while.
Yeah.
And that left Aunt Ray to tend us, and she couldn't quite handle it.
Did you like Partridge better?
What?
What did you like, Partridge or?
Oh yeah, I love Partridge. It was in California, you know, it was so busy and everything else that I didn't have room. The next year, they sent me up to stay with Grandma for 2 years.
And what was it like living with Grandma?
What?
What was it like living with Grandma?
You know, I was so happy to get out of California that it was great. Things there were really well organized. Grandma Owens got up and did the chores, cooked breakfast, and we ate, and then he went to the farm, and I was with Grandma and whatever other kids came around for the rest of the day. And then when school started, I had to go to school, and but I had the run of the town. I could go home with any kid, or I could come to Grandma's house, but I needed to be there. Well, folks knew that I needed to be there, and they'd send me home. So.
And you did riding club there with a horse named Sugar?
Well, yeah, but that was years later. That was see, I was 6.
When did you start getting into horses?
You what?
When did you start getting into horses?
The second summer that I was there. First summer I was 6 years old. And the second summer I was 7, and Uncle Ned started taking me on the mountain with him. I went to school 2 years in California. Well, that had been when I was 5 and 6. I started the 7th grade in California, and then switched to Partridge for 7th and for 7-year-old 3rd grade and end of 2nd and 3rd grade when I moved up to California, or up to Partridge anyway.
And then you taught at BYU?
Did what?
Then you taught at BYU?
When I taught at BYU?
Yeah.
Well, it was the last quarter I was up there that they asked me to teach their lab sections.
And how did you get into BYU?
By accident.
Let's hear that story.
Mom was all anxious for me to go up there because Ken Cooper went up there. Ken was Mom's favorite boy. She was, her and Cora were good friends, Ken's mother. And George and Dad were decent friends. They both played basketball. And George was 2 or 3 years older than Dad. And George was on the national high school team. They went to Chicago to play the finals. Him and his companions. Uncle Kern was on the team also, but they could only take 5 players with them because they didn't have enough money to pay to get the 6th one there. So Uncle Kern didn't get to go to the national finals. And so Mom wanted me to go up there, and she found out where Ken was staying, and she wrote a letter up to that housing development and got a room for me, and they okayed it. So I thought I had a place to stay there and could go to school, and Mom did too. And freshman day, we understood about freshman day. You had to go up and go through the big field house in a long line, and at one corner you met the president of the college and shook his hand, and then you turned around and you picked up a package that they had already prepared for each student, and then you went around and got the classes approved that you wanted to go to. Well, I had no idea what classes I wanted to go to, and never even heard about it. I'd been Dixie for 2 quarters, and I shook hands with the president and told him I was from Panguitch. Oh, good. And chatted for just a minute, and I turned around to pick up my packet, and they didn't have a packet for me. I had never registered to come to school there. And they looked through the list of all the P's, and then they looked through all the O's and all the G's, everywhere. They looked and started, and it was holding up the line because they couldn't send the next guy over to pick up his package because I was doing it. President turned around and he said, "We'll make him a new one." They made me a new package right there on the spot and handed it to me, and I went and registered for my classes. So I was never accepted to go to BYU except from the president right there.
Then, can you tell us the story about your one boss that you had that didn't like you very well when you were working for the BLM?
Oh God, I don't know.
The one down to Elko or whatever?
Yeah, over to Ely.
Yeah, Ely. There you go.
He was a nut. He was actually alcoholic.
Yeah.
And, he'd come out to Elko or out to Baker. Actually, I lived and worked at Lehman Cave and Baker, and he lived in Elko, and he'd start out to Baker, knew he was going to be able to have me drive him around for the day, and he'd start at the bar between Ely and I can't remember the name of the valley. The next valley, there was a bar right on the highway. He'd get a drink there, and then he'd drive on over to Strawberry Cafe, and he'd stop and get a drink there. Then he'd come on down over the pass, and into Snake Valley, and go to the what they call it. I can't even remember the bar over on the state highway, and get a drink there, and then he'd come on into town at lunchtime and want me to go to lunch and have a drink with him. So we'd go to lunch at the bar there, and we'd have a hamburger, and he'd have a drink and I'd have a Coke. And we'd finish that, and then I'd drive for him to take him to show him whatever he wanted to see on the district. We had from one end to the other's 60 miles, and up the canyons. Each one was 20 miles up, and there was 6 canyons that we could go in. So he'd show me what he knew about each canyon on different days, and we'd go up those, and he would have a beer in his pocket, and most of the time I didn't have anything to drink except that Coke. And then we'd come back, and he'd leave me at Baker, and I'd drive back up home up to the Lehman Cave, and he'd start home, stop at each bar on the way home, and he'd get mad at me because I wouldn't drink with him. And it just kept, I don't know, wanting me to do something different, wanting me to do something different.
Is that the same one that made you go?
The what?
Is that the same one that made you go out on the mountain on the 4th of July?
Yeah.
And what did you do that day?
Well, without knowing the country, it's darn hard to explain it, because the Snake Range there starts on the north end as one big glob, and canyons running up in from both sides. And then you get to the end of it, and it kind of peters out into the valley, and there's a long draw runs right up the center, and it runs up past the second canyon that comes in from the sides, but it splits the mountain, and down in that canyon the white fir start to grow, and he wanted me to check to be sure that there wasn't anybody cutting trees in that canyon, and that was the day that Paul and Ken had Radiant Remite and Adalite running in the Dairy District Derby, and I wanted to go over there pretty bad. He called me on Friday, and he says, I think there's, like Thursday again, I think there's people cutting Christmas trees up there from over to Beaver. I would like you to go up that canyon tomorrow and check it out. So I went up the canyon and got clear to the top. There was not another fresh track on that road, and you drive 6 or 8 miles up the wagon road up through there, and I get clear to the top where it turns around, and the horse trail goes on up the canyon, and turned the truck around, and then started to rain. Oh man, I'm gonna have trouble getting down this trail. And got to one turn, and it was just a little slick, and I started to sliding a little, and the truck, I stalled and let it kind of slip down the trail, and looked up at the tree, and that tree said, July 24th, 1938, 7 or 6 or 8. Raining like hell, no chance to stop. And it was signed by, I forgot his name. a guy from Manti. I guess he was herding sheep up there. And there I was on the 24th of July, wanting to go to Beaver so bad my teeth were aching. And raining, not raining real hard. I was glad it didn't rain as hard as he said, raining like hell. And I drove on back down and went home so mad I could hardly stand it. But I loved that little draw. That was fun. I took him on a ride there when later on. We had the other assistant there haul us down to the bottom of the canyon, and we took that trail and went on up the canyon. And we got to where we could see the head bowl of that canyon, and he says, I think there's a trail up here that goes off into one of the side canyons there, and we could ride down there and meet this guy and have him pick us up there. And that was his plan to start with. But I didn't know it. I thought we was going back down to the trailer. And he couldn't tell me where the trail was. Finally, I found a way off there, and I mean, it was a treacherous sucker way. And we went down through the canyon, and a mess. Woo, what a way. I wasn't sure we was ever going to get there, and I wasn't sure which canyon we were in. And finally got down there to where there was a road coming up the canyon, and I recognized that road because I'd been there 10 times. And he says, well, this is the wrong road. This won't take us there. Oh, yes, it will. I've been here. I've been here, he says. I've been to the end of that road. And I said, I know you have, but this is it. And we rode down there about, 3/4 of a mile, and there's a guy in the pickup waiting for us. Can't believe we ever made that trip.